Are we going to the theater less often? So I want to give you the most holistic picture. Censorship. Before it reaches our audience, the governments come in. I don't get it. We don't see that kind of innovation happening in cinema. Cinemas are in a unique position. These are experiences that you just can't recreate online. I don't care what Netflix party feature you use, one of my all-time favorite movies. They definitely have a future. Financing. How do movies get made? Who pays for it? So if you think about it, studios, even though they're very large like Disney and Fox, are very different from tech companies like Apple or Microsoft or Google. Even though they might be of relatively the same size, a couple multiple billions, what's the main difference is that Apple, for example, has $250 billion in cash available. Tech companies have a lot of cash that they can readily invest and spend on research or products or expanding market share, whatever it is. But studios don't have that kind of cash readily available, which is why every time they invest in a new movie, they often find different partners to collaborate with and share the risk load with. There was a time that investors and high net individuals used to all flock to Hollywood to go and invest in movies because it was so profitable. And then came Silicon Valley. So now all of them go there to invest in high growth tech startups instead of movies. So obviously budgets have to be spent much more cautiously. So generally speaking, big budgets are given only to cast and crew that kind of have a certain credibility. So a popular actor or a great director, they are the ones that receive the highest budgets because the budget ultimately is determined by how much the movie can make when it's distributed. So only these guys have the kind of reach to distribute their movies globally, and that's why they get the biggest budgets to make the movies. And there are many ways that producers reduce the cost of production itself while shooting the movie. For example, you could choose a location where governments want to promote film activity. So by shooting over there, you get a certain tax incentive or a grant or a subsidy of some sort, which reduce your costs. Or you could, if you're a credible director, you could sell the rights to TV networks to show the movie right after it's out of theaters, or sell the rights to streaming services beforehand, which will reduce your upfront expenditure as well. Movies without known actors or talented directors or credible producers hardly even receive funding for a theatrical release if you want to release in the cinemas. You could receive funding if you just want to release online or you want to sell the rights to TV, but to go for a theatrical release, it usually involves a couple really talented people coming together on a project, which obviously means it is a huge budget. So that means the new players, people who just want to create a film, maybe it's a third or fourth film, they want to work with B or C grade actors and release it in cinemas. That's not that common. Studios want to repeat the same formula that works over and over again with the same cast, the same basic plot, which is why you see so many franchises in the cinema space. Whether it's MCU or Disney's movies, you see so many franchises because it is a formula that works and studios capitalize on what works instead of experimenting with something new, which is why streaming services can take on that kind of risk. If you think about it, Stranger Things primarily involves a young cast. Even the people behind the camera are relatively young people who are new to the space and are now given the opportunity to create a show, and that show became, I think, number 2 or 3 in terms of how well it did on Netflix's platform. So we don't see that kind of innovation happening in cinema, and that's because we're not giving enough chances for new talent to come up with new ideas and showcase that on a big screen, because all the larger players already grab the theaters. So as you saw, producing a movie can be really extensive, but just as important, or probably even more so, is distribution. How do you get the movie in front of the audiences that you want to reach? That's where a distributor comes in. So a distributor picks up the movie because they have relationships with cinemas all around the globe. They ship either the physical reel or now digital copies. They send the copies of the movies to all these theaters. They manage whether the theaters are clearly revealing their figures in terms of sales and passing on passing on the revenue back to the distributor. So they're the intermediary that does all this. They are also responsible for two other most important things in the success of a film, which is marketing and promotions. They take care of advertising within local geographies, whether it's in a bus stop or in the large screen in hearts of cities. So they take care of marketing and promotions for the movie. So distribution is a huge process, and major studios sometimes do this themselves, but usually most of the other ones go with a dedicated distributor. Even Apple original movies that they're going to be creating, I think it started with The Banker. Banker is a good movie, by the way. The theatrical release was cancelled for some other reason, but check it out either way. All their Apple original movies, they're going to be going with A24 as their distributor. Now, A24 has also released other movies like Moonlight or Lady Bird, Midsommar, all these movies that you might have heard of, because they also have networks of cinemas all around the globe to showcase these films. And these films, by any standard, are not the usual commercial kind, if you noticed, right? So these distributors like A24, Annapurna Pictures, BH Productions, which is dedicated to horror films, all of these distributors are good examples of people who pick up great movies which are not essentially huge productions involving big cast members, nothing like that. These are great, well-made movies that they pick up and distributed globally. These are a few examples, but there are many more distributors who are doing exactly this. So if you've been following the process, even after the movie is produced, it is the distributor's role to get it in front of the audiences. And distributors are generally competing with the larger distribution networks of major studios. So the Disneys, the Foxes, these guys get the maximum number of shows when their movies are released. So the maximum number of screens for their movies, which means there's a lesser number of screens available for the smaller budget movies, which is why many of the smaller budget movies don't even get a solid theatrical release. They just go around film festivals, or these days directly release online. If there was a more level playing field over here, and distributors picked up movies that would do the most well in the box office, as opposed to the most credible studios, there are obviously many flops. If they were to pick just the movie based on how good it is, regardless of where it's coming from, we might see much more choice in the variety of movies available at cinemas for us to view, as opposed to just a few major studios, and every once in a while you have some sort of a boring film. See, the truth is there are a lot of films that are just for critics to view and not really for a mass audience. It's a very, very niche community that might enjoy it, but there are a lot of other films that would definitely benefit from a little more distribution if they were done properly around the world. This is probably my favorite page in the whole book. It shows how major studios capture most of the box office. So you have Disney at 43%, and keep in mind, Disney includes Pixar, Marvel, Lucasfilm, and also they acquired Fox in 2018. So Fox's 8% plus Disney's 43% is 51%, over half of the global box office. The amount we spend in cinemas goes directly to one of Disney's studios, and then 16% for Warner Brothers, 13% for Universal, 12% for Sony Pictures, 5% for Paramount, and 3% for Lionsgate Film.